Documentaries are about the people that you meet and the stories you can tell. Stories of tragedy, laughter, hope and desperation, across faraway lands or right here in your own backyard. This podcast brings these stories to you, the listener, so that you can experience the adventures of documentary filmmaking in audio form while embarking on daily adventures of your own. Welcome to Barefoot Media's Stories Within Stories podcast with your host, Simon Holland. Jewell is a music journalist based in Perth, Western Australia. Originally from a law background, Steph entered the profession after a chance encounter and has quickly become one of the hardest working people in the music scene, reliably covering everything from local shows to international acts and providing insightful interviews with the musicians themselves. Without further ado, we welcome Steph to the show. Welcome to the show, Stephanie Jewell.
Hello.
Is that your real name or is that a made-up name like Rob Zombie?
No, it's totally my name.
That's a score.
It's, pretty decent. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, you could have come out with something like, I don't want to say any names and offend anyone with that name, but you just got the sweet name.
Thank you. Yeah, my parents wanted to call me Crystal when I was, in utero, but thankfully they didn't.
Crystal Jewell.
Bit of a weird name, yeah.
Moved to Freo immediately. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here because you're really working in a space that's near and dear to my heart, which is two of them actually, music and journalism at the same time. And I've seen your work, I've been subjected to your work, and it's wonderful. And you're the hardest working person, probably one of the hardest working people in the scene at the moment, and really important for the future of music in Perth. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the music journalism scene.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, by the way. So how it all sort of began, it only began in February this year, and it kind of just happened serendipitously. It was really quite an interesting story to begin with. I'd gone through a really hard time. My world fell apart over New Year's. Just a lot of stuff in my life fell apart in the wrong way. I'd moved back to my parents' house. I was living in Leederville. I became a bit of a hermit and closed myself off from the world for a little while. I'm like, I just need to hide away in my cave and not, do anything. And then it was actually Frank and Ryan, the HFM guys. And they were like, hey, Steph, you can't hide away forever. We're going to this gig. Why don't you come with us? It's going to be really fun. It's Jeremy Harry Harris and the Treachery of the Ravens. And they're doing this huge thing where it's like videos on the screen and a guy's going to sit down and interview him about the making of it and everything. It's going to be really awesome. And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll go. And it was a little bit of a drive in Morley, but I got there and I was watching it all happen. And being in the radio, Frank and Ryan knew pretty much everyone. There was Coops also from HFM and Sean Bennett from The Rock Pit doing the interview with Jeremy Harry Harris. And they were just talking and having a big chin wag. And I happened to overhear, my ears perked up and he's, oh yeah, I do these music reviews. And I was like, oh, tell me about that. Tell me more.
Dream job. Yeah.
Oh, really exciting. I would love to do something like that. That'd just be so interesting. I'm always at gigs anyway. Always raving about various bands I've seen to my friends. Oh my God, you got to come check this band out next time. So he was like, well, if you're interested, here's my details. Shoot me an email. We'll have a chat. Give you a call tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I sent him an email and had a quick phone call. Next minute, I'm reviewing Ash Grunwald at the Milk Bar. And that was my first review.
Were you freaking out? Because it's a different type of paying attention when you know you got to write about it. Hey.
I was very much freaking out, but honestly, I was just enjoying myself so much because it's definitely different just going to a gig where you can just enjoy it versus having to actually pay attention. And I'm always just kind of taking notes and little tidbits and things if they say stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still really enjoyable. You're still there enjoying the music. So it doesn't take away from that. It just kind of adds to it. Kind of like you get, a burger from McDonald's and you get a free sundae.
Oh yeah, or you're watching a movie but you've read the book and they've done a good job of the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's cool. It adds context. And there's actually a funny valley in there where when you know a few things, it can ruin it for a bit. If you're watching a movie but you know how to make a movie, it can ruin it. But then when it's really good, you appreciate it a whole new level, hey? And
I think Ash Grunwald was probably a really wicked first gig to review because he's just such a crazy musician and does all these slides and stuff with his guitar and stomp and things, and it was just absolutely out of this world.
Yeah.
So there was a lot to write about.
And what's your process generally for getting an article out? Because, I mean, when I say hardworking, I'm not joking. When you do music festivals, you interview every band, you transcribe all of that, I'm assuming, and then you write up the article and put it out. I mean, it's mental, 16 bands or whatever you're going to do at once. Like, it's crazy.
It is a bit ambitious. Sometimes I'm like, why did I do this? But then afterwards I'm like, oh, that's fine, because I love what I do and I love sharing the music and I love telling the world about it and helping these bands with promotion and stuff. So my process with a review, usually I'll contact the accreditation person, Nick, and I'll be like, hey, I really want to review this band, and she'll do all the PR stuff and send all the emails. Yep. And then it'll come to the night. I'll go there, get my ticket or whatever, watch the gig. I'm usually taking notes throughout. So if you see me on my phone, please don't hate me.
Don't tell me to fuck off and put my phone away and enjoy the moment, because this is my job.
Yeah, literally. And I have had, put your phone away. And I'm like, I can't. I'm taking notes to write an article about how great this band is. And they're like, oh, okay, that's okay then.
No, you always say, oh yeah, what's your name? And then you like take that down, and then they're in the article like, this jerk next to me.
This one guy. No, I couldn't shame anyone like that, although I have thought about it in the past.
And, with great responsibility. Wasn't great power comes great responsibility.
That's it. And then I'll email my notes to myself just so I've got it in case anything happens with my phone. And then the next day or the next few days, I'll pretty much just go through all my notes on one screen and have a second screen there and kind of get to relive it as I'm typing it. So it's so much fun and I love doing it because it literally is you can just see it in your mind's eye. You're almost back at the gig again when you're talking about, oh, this bit and then this bit happened and went into this song and pulled this wicked solo and da-da-da, and it's just really fun. And for interviews, it's not too dissimilar. Usually I'll contact whoever's running whatever and say, hey, I really want to interview the people or the bands or what's going on. They'll send a bunch of emails, I'll organize it, I'll rock up, and then I'm going to interview.
Yeah.
And then I don't really have set questions either. I kind of just like it to be a bit more free form and sort of see how the conversation goes as to what questions to ask next. I always like to start with the beginnings as well. How'd you get into this? What made you do this? Or what's your motivation behind it? Because I find people really interesting and really fascinating, and I think everyone's got a story to tell. And I think that's really cool. And then pretty much I'll get all that, have it all recorded, take it home, and then it's just play, pause, transcribe.
Yeah.
And it's a long process, but it's fun.
You've entered at a really interesting time in the world of music and global music, because it's really shifted from a very traditional model and bands making money and their stars and things to now it's open to everybody. The barriers to entry are minimal and it's saturated and nobody can really make a living out of it anymore. I don't think there's been a band in the top 10 in the US charts for years. That's all these individuals and collabs and stuff. So what's the vibe that you get? You're coming in hot, you're super enthusiastic, but what's your sort of temperature check of the music world?
It's really interesting actually, because the traditional ways of the 80s and 90s where people would, make music, put posters up and try and advertise themselves and send CDs and vinyl and say, hey, listen to this to the radio or whatever, and then they'd play it and that's how people would get to hear it. It's also different with how people consume music these days. I think it used to be a 3-minute attention span on the internet when you're scrolling things, 3 minutes. And then it got down to, I think it was 60 seconds and then 12 seconds. And I've heard recently even as low as 7 seconds. You just got to grab people in that moment. The internet is fantastic. It's definitely changed how people consume music, but also how music's made these days, because people can be in one country and collaborating with someone in another country. Psychroptic, when I interviewed Jason recently, he's in Tasmania and one of the other guys is in Tasmania, one of the other guys is in Melbourne, and one of the other guys is in America. So it's all just a really interesting way of creating and collaborating. And I think that's really beautiful and really cool.
That guy in America, his mom's probably she's like, who are you in a band with again? It's just these Tasmanian. It's just what? My kid is delusional.
Tasmania,
yeah. Yeah.
Is that in Seattle? But yeah, I find it's, a lot of people are probably pushing against it at first, but once you embrace technology and see all the benefits and positive things that can happen from it, it's actually such a beautiful thing how it can kind of have this big metamorphosis, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And I think it's really cool. And a lot of people that I've spoken to in bands and artists and stuff, even around the world, I interviewed Frederick from Perth recently, which is really cool. And, he was just chatting about how you can collaborate with a producer in America or whatever. And it's just, it opens a lot more doors for people too, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah, and it's also made it, I think the world has become tribal rather than geographically tribal. So, if you're into a band like Opeth or something like that, you can join Opeth Club or whatever and talk to people and exchange. And you see someone walking down the street in a whole other country wearing an Opeth shirt, you got to get along. Like before, there's a certain sound like Norwegian black metal versus Finnish, the sort of stuff where you do Viking kind of stuff, epic things, and then German power metal. And it was sort of really kind of geographically taste driven. But now it's like, poof, whole world is involved.
Yeah, I love that you can have like someone that's really into Norwegian black metal in Perth or in Melbourne or whatever. And I love that there's all these bands that are popping up that are similar vein to that, because it just opens so many doors and it allows kind of the more underground music scene to just expand and get more exposure. And also for the people that go to bands and listen to music to actually see that rather than just having to go to Europe or the festivals. So it's really cool. That's the thing. It's totally tribal, absolutely.
And I think when international bands come, they get a shock. They're like, where are we going to find a Viking support band in Perth, Western Australia? And then bang, ready to go. Yeah. So I think they get it. They're like, wow, this is cool. Like our culture has permeated down to the very depths of the world, which is where we are, where we live. And so when you're doing your interviews or something, are you looking at a narrative? Are you trying to get a thread there? Do you have a hunch of where it's going to go? Or is it more reactive?
I think it's definitely reactive in a way, but I sort of like to start and ask people about their journey, their story, what the origins are of what they're doing, just to kind of find out where they've been to get to this point, because I think that that's such a beautiful thing and should be celebrated. Like all this hard work's got to here, and that's really cool. But I also love sort of seeing what they're listening to, what they're working on currently and what they're working towards as well. So in terms of narrative, I'd say that it's kind of where have you been, where are you now, and where are you going? Like, what do you want to do or what do you want to create with this? Rather than just like what's your favorite color or what's your favorite food? I'd much rather sort of ask people, like what was the concept behind this album, or like where do you want to go from this album next? Say creating like a second concept album that kind of ties into it, or, and just kind of like hearing about people's passion and motivation behind why they've made what they've made and how they've made it.
Well, I think it's really helpful for bands too, because they don't often articulate what they're trying to do. And I mean, if you're seeing a band on stage, you're seeing a real snapshot of something that's really well developed, because it takes a lot to get in a band, to find the people, to write the songs. Like if they're on a stage, it's a long way down the track. And so if you're developing and then someone asks you, hey, where's this band going? You're like, you say something, you kind of in your head, you're like, oh shit, I got to do that now. Like this album needs to be done by summer,
I think it's also really interesting from all the bands that I've spoken to and interviewed over the year, because it's not been years, it's only been like 10 months, where they're like, oh yeah, we had this lineup, then we had this lineup, then we had this lineup, and it took us ages to get the right lineup, and now we finally got the right lineup.
Yeah.
Like, to know that it's okay to change things, and if something's not working, it's okay to sort of evolve and develop and grow in different ways, or to try different things or whatever. I think that that's something that's not really discussed enough, but it is important in music as well.
It's massive, actually. And that, I mean, you anyone that goes through the recording process, you ask any recording engineer, bands break up sometimes like the day that it's finished. They're just like, I can't handle these people. And also because it's like anything for any group project, it's the team you assemble. And it's not about having your friends involved. It's about having people that are like-minded and pointing the same direction. That direction can waver and change. Like members disappeared from Wrath of Fenrir because they had kids, and they're like, we've got like this dependent now. It's impossible to. So you've just got to go retool and go again. I think why bands struggle with this is because you grow. The longer you're in that band, in that role, trying to lead, I suppose, and keep morale high and all of the things required to keep a band going, the longer you're in, you learn skills and tricks as well. And so putting the right group of people together to create that chemistry is really key. It's not a talent thing either. At the start, you're sort of going, I just got to figure out who the best guitarist in town is, grab that dude, put him in my band. But he might not be the cool, like he might be so good that he's in 10 bands and then can never jam with you. Or he's like, I'm going home, doesn't help any pack up, the drummer pack up or all the little things that keep everybody happy. And then you got a chemistry issue. You got to go, can I be in a camper van with this guy touring America for 40 dates? And that's the kind of the key question. Then if these are cool people and professionals as well, like, you get people in a band that are so talented, so cool to hang around, but late to the gig, miss sound check or,
That's a bit cringe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just rough. Like band stuff is really an art form.
Yeah.
And would you have any advice that you've picked up from if you're coalescing everybody you've spoken to in the last year? What do you think are the keys for bands?
Yeah, you're right when you say that what you see on stage is really just a snapshot. because